Hello, and welcome to Sunny Days Podcast, the podcast for folks to start living their grooviest, most magical lives. I'm your host, Alex the Good Witch, a professional psychic, healer, speaker, and coach. I use my degree in biochemistry, experience as a mental health provider, and spiritual gifts to align your subconscious programming with your conscious desires, guiding you into your dream reality. Here, you will receive practical guidance, insight, and stories that you can apply to create your happiest, most fulfilling life today. If you're ready to feel lit up, capable, and inspired, I invite you to join me on this sunny day. Hello, welcome to episode 3 of the Sunny Days podcast. Today's episode is all about positive thinking and toxic positivity. So what are these two things? Where do they overlap? Where do we get confused with them? Where do we take things maybe too far to where they are unhelpful rather than being constructive? What are the differences between them? How can we use positive thinking in ways that are constructive, are beneficial, have all these magical, powerful properties to them, but in a way that is not destructive, harmful, such as toxic positivity. So let's start with some background on positive thinking. So positive thinking is a tool that continues to go through phases of being popular. And this tool is often seen in the self-improvement world, including in cognitive behavioral therapy, the mental health space, as well as in the spiritual space. Even though they're often brought up in different ways, you can see a lot of positive thinking being used as a tool in both of these worlds. So as far as positive thinking in more of the mental health space, the intention with positive thinking is to think positive thoughts, and your thoughts affect your emotions. Your emotions affect more of your thoughts, and it becomes a positive cycle of inducing positive feelings, positive thoughts, positive feelings, positive thoughts. And then when you continue on that cycle, it starts to become your beliefs. When it starts to become your beliefs, your expectations, your perspective, that's all in a positively induced way. Now you're going to start acting in line with those positive thoughts. When you start acting from that place, you're going to start making changes in your life. You're going to start seeing changes in your world, all from that positive thinking. So that is the concept of it. That is that chain reaction that takes place. The purpose of it, it's to help you not only feel better, but like I said, start to actually see changes in your world over time from that feeling. Whether or not the action that you take is you're super conscious of it, over time, you're going to start behaving differently. When you're coming from a different point of view, you're coming from a different emotional space. So that's more of how it's brought up in like the mental health, changing our behaviors, changing our cognitive awareness. That's how it comes up in that space. As far as spirituality, it often comes up with manifestation, visualization. That's where positive thinking comes up. So it comes up in a way where when you think positive thoughts and you think in alignment with what you are manifesting, you visualize it, you feel it, you have positive emotions around the thought of it, and you continue to really cultivate that positive thinking, that positive manifestation, visualization. That's going to bring that thing for fruition. That's what's going to make it come true, is that the more you see it in that light, the more you feel it and taste it and bring yourself there as if it's already yours, and you align your thoughts to be positive and that they support that thing manifesting. They support that visual. They support that is a reality. They support that you're able to breathe it and taste it right now. They are supportive of it coming true rather than what people would call doubts, limited beliefs is a big word that's used. It's almost like instead of limiting beliefs, you're having this positive thinking that supports it rather than blocks it or gets in the way with it. So that is how it's often brought up in the spiritual world. So the thing with positive thinking is that both of these areas, there are aspects of positive thinking that do support you, can definitely make great changes in your life and how you feel, can help you with spiritual practices and magic, such as manifesting. But there are aspects of it that can do that. It's a piece of the puzzle. And a problem that comes about is that when positive thinking becomes the entire puzzle, the entire solution, it's not seen as just a piece of the puzzle, that is when we can start to go into toxic positivity. So I'm going to talk a bit about toxic positivity and what that is, and then we'll circle back to see kind of what aspects can we take with positive thinking, where do we draw the line, what is our practice here, how can we use it, what do we need to shift into and shift out of. So like I said, it can go too far into toxic positivity when we're acting like it is the whole solution, it's the whole thing. So what is toxic positivity? Toxic positivity is a level of positivity, whether like emotionally or positive thoughts, and that pressure to be positive in order to try to get what we want and feel how we want to feel, that becomes so overdone where there is a toxic level of positivity. Just like other things in life, like literal chemicals, there can be certain chemicals that we can have a certain amount of, but then it becomes toxic when it reaches a certain level. So same with positivity. There's nothing wrong with positivity in and of itself. Positivity is a wonderful thing. It helps us enjoy this life. But once it gets to a certain level, and it's like saturated our system, saturated our emotions, saturated our mind, or we're like overdosing on this positivity. It's not even naturally saturating it. We might be like forcing our hand and like forcing this intake of positivity and this conceptualization of positivity. Now it's become a toxic level. There's too much of it. And the reason that this becomes an issue is that it leads to things like, let's start with the spirituality, because that's what's coming to mind. It leads to things like spiritual bypassing. So for instance, spiritual bypassing is bypassing like your human experience, what you're actually going through as a person, anything that involves being human. So like how your mind is set up, how your nervous system is set up, the experiences that you're going through as a human, the pain that you're going through as a human, the issues that you're facing as a human. Spiritual bypassing is avoiding all those things, bypassing it, and just saying that spirituality can transcend all of it, to where it kind of becomes like, oh, well, that's not real. That's not actually happening. That's not important. That's going to be really downsized. And we're just going to focus on only the spirituality. So as much as I'm a spiritualist, and we are souls in a human body, and as a soul, maybe those aren't problems, because souls are just like these orbs of energy and life that are, time is not linear to them. They're having this whole other experience. So yeah, maybe to souls, that's all an illusion, everything like that. This is a game that we chose to step into and to play, and we chose to be these characters in our life and have these experiences for soul growth, all of that. But we're here. We're here, and we're humans right now, and this is real. This is real. This human experience is real to us. This is our actual reality. Again, if we're souls in a human body, souls having a human experience, we have to remember that human experience part is still there. That's part of the sentence. We're not just souls. So spiritual bypassing is the avoidance of all that, which can become an issue. And this is where it actually causes the same issues from both like the spirituality standpoint and the mental health standpoint, is that it starts to overlook our actual problems and how we're feeling and thinking And it's completely overlooking, avoiding, disregarding, being ignorant to, downsizing these real experiences that we're having, these real emotions, these real thoughts. And when we do that, it doesn't make them necessarily go away. We're just not looking at them. We're just not facing them, solving them, experiencing them. And what's going to happen is that those things are still going to be there. Those things are still going to be there. They're going to potentially cause us more problems. They're potentially going to pile up. They're potentially going to cause us a lot of pain and resistance in our body and tension and things that are going on subconsciously because they're still there. So whether we see them piling up like in life and not going unsolved, or if there are things deep within us that aren't being addressed and acknowledged, either way, it's going to pile up. It's still there and it's not being attended to. It's not being taken care of. So like I said, this is kind of the same issue that comes up whether we look at it from a spiritual standpoint or a mental health standpoint. So from the mental health standpoint, with toxic positivity, if we are only looking at the positive, if our goal is only to feel positively and to think positively in order to try to change our lives, to, even if it's on the spiritual side, to manifest things or to feel better or to change our neural pathways and the way that we think, but it's that only puzzle piece, it's that sole thing that we're trying to do, well, now we aren't acknowledging our other emotions. We aren't acknowledging our other beliefs and our thoughts. And same thing with just like our issues and our problems. They're still there. They're just being unattended to. They're being ignored. They're not being addressed. It's not that it's going to make them go away. It's just sweeping them under the rug. It's just, hiding them, putting things over it. I'm trying to think of like the analogy, I guess sweeping under the rug, but I'm feeling in like even a bigger way. Like you're really sweeping things under the rug. You're really hiding them under like layers and layers of things. And on the surface, you may feel positive, because that is what you're focusing on. But what's happening is there is things festering deep down because they are real and that they're there and they're not being attended to. So this brings up a really good point that is going to steer us towards some solutions with this, is that when anything is not attended to, when anything doesn't feel heard or addressed, it's going to continue to try to be heard, just like a person. It's not going to have you just be like, oh, that's not there, that doesn't exist, oh, like only positive, and have this like ignorance to it, this ignoring of it, dismissing it, downplaying it, whatever it is, gaslighting it, doesn't matter. Think of these things, these emotions, these thoughts, this programming inside you, even like your issues, think of them as personified. And when you do that, and when you're dismissive to somebody, they're going to want to be heard. They're not going to just, go away and like that's just going to solve them. Things need to be addressed. Things need to feel heard. So they may attempt to try to feel heard by being even louder, right? By coming in even stronger. So more stress might come up, more overwhelm might come up, anxiety. You might be combated with even more negative thoughts and negative feelings. A lot of times when people try to start their positive thinking journey, they are just completely argued with what people call their inner critic. And they are just completely like bombarded by this backlash. People call it the ego, the inner critic, but this thing, this force comes up equally to them trying to suppress it and to only have positive thinking and to do that instead. Well, this force is going to try to be heard. So it might get louder, both like in your head, like the voice is louder and stronger, more convincing, more mean, or if it's like a feeling, it might turn into more stress and more pain, a lot of like resistance going on there. Or it might also be sneaky, just like some people don't cope with things, don't cope with not being heard only explicitly or only directly. Some people do, but some people, internalize that and then they lash out like in other ways. Same with these parts of us, our feelings, our thoughts. They may retaliate and try to be heard by being even more loud and aggressive, but they also might be sneaky. They may, do things like self-sabotage. They may like creep up and just get in our head and get in the way. It may not be what seems like this very explicit battle going on between us. But no matter what, they're not being heard if they're not being acknowledged and addressed. They're totally going to come up and try to do so. Just like people, they're not just going to go away and roll over. You can't just put them under the rug forever. Things are going to fester. They need to be addressed. So when it comes to positive thinking, there are a lot of aspects that are constructive, that are helpful. A couple things that I mentioned is that chain reaction of thoughts and feelings breeding more similar thoughts and feelings, becoming more of a thought pattern and belief, kind of turning into a more dominant neural pathway, which means that it starts becoming what you automatically start thinking, the perspective you automatically start having, what you start to expect in your life. And then from there, you're able to start automatically acting more from that place. And when your actions are coming more from that place, you're going to see different results because subconsciously you're actually putting in a different input. So you're going to be putting in getting a different output, and you start to see changes in your life and you start to feel better. That totally holds true. Same with manifestation. There's parts of it that hold true. But what we're going to do is we're going to start poking some holes in how to do things a bit differently, and kind of like myth busting some of those things, because it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So let's start with the mental health side. So yes, there's that chain reaction that leads to seeing changes on the outside. But a very important part that is often overlooked with positive thinking is that with positive thinking, that's where they start. They're like, start thinking positive. Have positive thoughts, you feel better, you start to act differently, and change your world. And that's where they start, and that's kind of where they end. But the thing is, when you have a negative emotion or a negative thought come up, I do not recommend starting at positive thinking. I do not recommend being like, okay, well then let's think positively about this. That's not, no, there is a step before that that's very important. When you do that, you are ignoring that negative emotion. You are ignoring that negative thought. You are ignoring it. You're trying to just fix it, change it. You're trying to act like it's not there. None of that is addressing it. So the first step, it's really like step 0, is when that comes up, you first address that part. And so many people don't like to do that. They just like to go into the positivity because it seems better. But a part of the reason it seems better and it's so easy to try to just go there is because it can be easy to want to avoid the parts of us that seem difficult to deal with, rather than addressing them. But that's where the real changes happen, the real work happens. So when a negative thought, negative emotion comes up, where normally you would just try to think positive, and change that cognitive pattern and behavior, instead, first address that negative thought, that negative emotion. It's a couple different ways that you can do this. One of them would be to validate the thought or emotion. And this is really important because a lot of us think like, oh, but I can't validate that because it's not true and I don't want to believe that. Like, let's say the thought or emotion was like an inner critic kind of thought and it was really mean to you. You're like, I don't want to validate that. Or let's say the thought or emotion was like very fear-based and it was like telling you this like outlandish thing of how everything could go wrong, right? And you're like, well, I don't want to validate that. Like that's, it's a very ridiculous thought. It's very dramatic. And I don't want to believe that that's true. You're not necessarily validating what they're saying. You're not saying that what they're saying is true or fact. You're validating where they're coming from. You're validating their fear. Again, personifying things can help you understand yourself so much better by personifying all of these things, because our internal systems act like the same as our external systems. It's kind of like how the neurons in your brain look like the trees growing outside. There's these levels of everything from the micro to the macro that really just like reflect themselves. So these internal systems are so much like our external systems. So personify these thoughts, these emotions, right? So what they're saying may not necessarily be true, and you don't necessarily want to validate what they're saying, and that's fine, but you're validating what they're meaning, where they're coming from. So if it's fear, you're validating like, yeah, I understand that's scary. And you know what, that could happen. That happens. But blah, 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 blah. We'll go more into what to do, but you're validating that source. Think of a child who thinks that there's a monster under the bed, right? You're not necessarily validating that, like, yes, there's a monster that lives under your bed, and you're like saying that that's all true. But when you're validating them, you're validating that they're scared, and that the dark is scary, and that, it seems like unknown what's under there. And like you're working with them, you're acknowledging them. You're not just like, oh, you're fine. That would be positive thinking. It sounds so weird, but positive thinking is very dismissive when you don't have that piece first. It's really like saying to, for the example, a child is scared of a monster in their bed, and, oh, you're fine. You're fine. There's nothing there. Everything is fine and dandy. Everything's great. Everything's great. Everything's great. There's nothing there. There's nothing to be afraid of. That's not helpful. That's not going to help. That's not going to help that child. And just like I said about the piece about being ignored, is that's going to turn into something. That's not just going to have that go away, right? That didn't address anything. It may result in different responses and reactions, depending on that child, but it's not going to just be dismissed. Oh, it's solved, it's gone, it goes away, it never existed. It's still there. It's something that was not addressed or attended to. So again, we're going to start with, instead of going straight to what's the positive thought, how do I see this positively, positive thinking here, let's change the way I normally see things and think about this and just go to the positive. Let's look at it differently. Let's think differently. We're going to start with actually validating the thing that came up, validating the thing that's, more in line with how you're usually thinking that you're wanting to improve or change. Validate that. Validate where that's coming from. You can go deeper into this kind of work and really learn what part of you is telling you that. Where does that part come from? Work with them on how to change and be more in line with the belief systems that serve you. You can go through all those things in deeper work. I do that a lot in my coaching, my one-on-one coaching. That's a lot of what it's based off of. Of course, it's unique to everybody, but a lot of times that's something that we use, that a lot of people need in order to actually reprogram themselves and actually have like their deeper awareness, emotions, and thoughts align with what they want, instead of aligning with what they don't want, and aligning in a way that keeps getting in their way of having what they want, having the well-being that they want, or on the spiritual side, manifesting the things that they want. So you can totally go deeper into that. For this podcast, I'm going to leave you with validating that negative thought, emotion, whatever that is, first. And then from there, you can pivot. And you've probably heard of that with positive thinking, that pivoting piece. And that's great. That pivoting piece is important to shift over. But again, we're pivoting from a place where we've held this negative thought, this negative emotion. We validated it. We heard it. It feels heard. It feels better. It doesn't need to be as loud anymore. Why would it need to? You heard it. You understood it. You validated it. Why would it need to, get your attention even more and even louder and fester and pile up? It doesn't really need to now, right? It feels like soothed. It doesn't need to come up as strongly and get in your way. So you do that first, and now you can pivot. And when you're pivoting in a way that still like acknowledges and respects the negative thought and the negative feeling. It's not just pivoting like, oh, we're going to do what's right now, we're going to do what's good now or what's positive now, and we're just going to do this 180 and think the right way. No, it's like pivoting in a way where it's like, okay, I understand you, I hear you, this and that, whatever you need to do to validate. And it's like, I'm going to choose to think this about the situation. Or, I'm going to choose to feel more excited about the situation and less worried. I'm going to choose to do this. Hey, let's try what would happen if we, thought about it this way. Again, you're still using that kind of personification. It's more organic, it's more natural, and you're pivoting in a way where it's almost like you're holding their hand and you're like, let's try going over here. Let's see what this is like. It's not just like, okay, cool, I validated you, shut the fuck up. I'm going to just think that I'm just going to force myself to think this thought instead of thinking your way, right? You're working together with this. So that is super important with positive thinking when it comes to kind of like that mental health approach to positive thinking. So definitely I would start implementing that. And then with that, just know that in this more mental health approach, you'll get so much further with positive thinking when you honor your emotions and your thoughts, because they are parts of you that if you're ignoring them, they're going to just come up and be meddling with you and get in your way. So you'd rather be working with them. You'd rather be on the same team, on the same side. So you can think about it that way. And that's going to really help make positive thinking effective rather than toxic positivity, where toxic positivity does not honor, those thoughts and those emotions and those things. So keep in mind that overall what you're doing is honoring the negatives, because negatives is a part of all of this, a part of the human duality. So you're honoring that. And when you do that, you shouldn't really get caught up in the toxic positivity place or going too far with that, getting a toxic level of positivity, because when you're honoring that negativity, when you're honoring where that's coming from and what that serves, then it's this nice balance there. You're not going to overdose on that positivity because it's not that sole piece of the puzzle. You're also incorporating the negative as well. And it's a nice balance to each other. So as far as more of a spiritual way of looking at things goes, I know that I said how we use positive thinking a lot in manifesting. That's usually where it comes up. So I could go on. I probably have more podcast episodes about this and my different takes on manifesting for sure. But as far as the positive thinking goes, remember that you are having a human experience. Even if you're a soul, which you are, and you're a very powerful and magical soul, you are having a human experience. So when we manifest just out of positive thinking, a key thing that we're missing is the fact that there are tools, opportunities, resources in our current reality. Keep that in mind. When we are manifesting with just positive thinking, visualization, pretend it's already yours. You can feel it, you can taste it, and it's only that, and that's the only piece. We're really missing out on the fact that there are tools, opportunities, and resources in our current situation. So what's happening is that we are just transporting ourselves into this future that we want. Pretend that the boyfriend that you want is there and you have them already, and like live that life and act like they're there. Pretend you have that money and live the life that you'd have if you had that money, and do that and do that and do that and only do that. Not only does it get really shameful and very difficult to keep up with that, because naturally we are human and naturally we're going to have negative thoughts. naturally, the more we don't see that manifestation come to fruition, we're going to start having doubts about it because we're like, I don't see it. That's all natural. And a lot of times the manifestation in that toxic positivity sense, that's framed as, oh, that's getting in the way. Because you're having these doubts, you are getting in the way of your own manifestation. That's your fault that it's not happening. And that's just like a shame spiral. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to try harder. And it's going to keep you from it. And it's not a fun journey. And a lot of times people will be like, oh, make it fun. And like, it has to be fun or else it's not going to work. Fun, fun, fun. But then naturally you're not having fun sometimes because you're like, I'm trying so hard and I'm not seeing it. And then every once in a while, you're going to get defeated. Sometimes you'll get these second wins. And you're like, okay, I'm going to be fun. It feels great. And then again, it just slaps you in the face that it's not there. And you're trying so hard and you're trying to live it and you pretend like it's there. But then sometimes you wake up and you realize you're pretending and it fucking sucks. It's an awful feeling. As you can see, I've been there and I definitely need more episodes on this particularly. But as far as positive thinking goes, that is where it turns into toxic positivity. There's obviously things that we're missing here. So like I mentioned, a thing that we're missing is that our current reality holds opportunities, tools, resources for us to use to actually make that manifestation come true, to actually have that be real. So when we just keep jumping into, oh, I'm there and I have it and I'm living that and I'm living in that timeline, we aren't living in this timeline. We're ignoring the things in this timeline because we have to pretend that we're in that other one. And in that other one, these problems don't exist. And in that other one, we don't have this lack. We have the things fulfilled. But the issue is, in order to get from here to there, a lot of the times, there are things we need here to do, to learn, to connect with, to find. They're here in our current situation. So we're never going to find them if we just keep warping our world to be that future manifestation. So, for example, when we get really, well, it's not really a for example, pardon me, but when we get really in tune with where we are right now, and we still know where we want to go, and we can still do visualizations and tap into that and feel it and feel how it would feel and, you know, have that vision board and think those thoughts that align with it. We can do those things. But again, that is not the sole thing, right? We really have to make sure we honor where we're at now. Because when we really dive into where we're at now, that's when we're going to get those things that we need to actually have that manifestation come about. We cannot go to the next chapter until we've gotten what we needed out of this chapter in order to be there. Because there's things in that next chapter that require certain things of us, certain ways that we've changed or improved, certain people we've met, certain lessons we've learned, certain resources we've obtained, and we can only accumulate those things in our current reality right now. So it doesn't do us a service to only be like daydreaming about that reality. So really honor where you're at now, and be honest with yourself with this for sure about where you are at now. It's okay that you're not where you want to be, but the more you're really honest with yourself, and you can accept that this is your reality right now and that you can totally make that other reality and you're going to make it happen and it's going to be real. But when you accept that this is what you're experiencing as a human right now, that other reality totally exists. It does. But let's accept where we are right now. The more you do that, the more you're going to allow yourself to see these opportunities, resources, tools, people that you need in order to have that next chapter open up and to be there and to be in that manifestation. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is actually how positive thinking can sometimes be seen as toxic positivity when in fact it's not. So kind of flip-flop. There's a lot of times where we think things are positive thinking, but really they turn in more into toxic positivity. But now it's the opposite. Times where we assume that this thing is toxic positivity when in fact it's just positive thinking. So for this, I want to point out that as humans, we have a negativity bias. We are biased towards negativity. And on top of that, some people are even more biased towards negativity than others. So we all are, as like a survival strategy, to be able to see, you know, where things may or may not need to be improved, what we need to look out for, what possible dangers there can be. So that's all within us as far as survival mode goes. But then on top of that, it depends on the environment you grew up in, the genes that have been given to you, the experiences that you've had. All of this can, you know, lead to even more of a bias, a negativity bias. So we all have it regardless. So with having a negativity bias, it's important to start to shift out of that to a more neutral place, where we can actually be aware of what can go well and positive things, and have positive expectations, and incorporate more positive feelings for overall well-being, balancing that out. So I do want to note that a lot of times people who are practicing positive thinking, or people who are positive, may easily be seen as toxic positivity when there actually isn't that toxicity there. So a lot of times, for instance, people will say, oh, that's wishful thinking, or that's just living in bliss, or, you know, that's not in this like reality, like you aren't being realistic. But the thing is, we are already not being realistic because we have a negativity bias, and that negativity bias, think about it. There's so many times you'll notice it more now where that thing is not realistic. Anytime I step into the street, that negativity bias thinks I'm gonna like get hit by a car, like every time, you know, like that's not realistic. It comes up with things all the time that aren't realistic, because that's its way of surviving, and that's fine. So we, as using positive thinking as a tool that is helpful, and using it in ways that I described here today that are a lot more healthy and don't really go into toxic positivity, when you do that, you're shifting this bias to be more neutral, more honest, more accepting of other possibilities that aren't just the negative. And when you do that, you can experience more of those circumstances and opportunities. And it really just opens you up rather than being narrow and closed with a certain bias. It opens you up to see a broad spectrum. And again, you're honoring that there is negativity and that it exists, and that it exists in you. You're honoring these things, you're working with these things. But what you're doing by focusing on the positive is just that it's a focus towards it. It's a pivot, because naturally you're so focused on the negative that you got to steer, you know, you got to look over here, you know, it's opening you up to see more. So as long as you do that, where you are honoring and accepting the negative and working with it, and, you know, seeing what you can do there, and all of that great stuff, where you are attending to it, then you're golden. You're not in that toxic positivity realm. So I definitely want to bring that up, because I think on a lot of times on the outside, people can use certain words that make it seem like, oh, your head is just in the clouds, and wishful thinking and things like that. And I am such a dreamer, and I am such a dreams come true, I want you to live your happiest, most fulfilled life person. And I do it in a way where like we work through the shit, and the shit is real. And like, I honor that. I honor the things that you've been through. I honor the things that you've experienced. I honor your human freaking experience and the emotions that come up and everything like that. And those are all addressed and held and worked with. And at the same time, hell yeah, your dreams can come true. Hell yeah, like you can live this absolutely incredible life. that people don't even realize is possible for them. So I definitely wanted to bring that up. I feel like it's so important in the work that you do. It's important in the work that I do. And like, that is my approach when I coach people, is like, I hold this vision of like, what is possible for you? And it's actually possible. It's not just wishful thinking. It can totally happen. And in getting there, part of it is that we are working on the things that are here and that are real and that are a real part of the experience. We're working with them and we're addressing them in ways that are safe and are constructive and are helpful. We're not ignoring them. And at the same time, we're totally holding the fact that, oh my gosh, we can expect amazing things to happen. Look at the amazing things that are happening, and like opening that vision, opening those doors and letting it flood in, because it can and it will flood in when you start to really see things in that way and do that kind of work. So yes, definitely wanted to put that out there, because I think it's very easy for people who are, maybe really deep in their negativity bias and having a hard time with that, where it's hard for them to see anything else, to just label those things as blissful ignorance or wishful thinking and things like that. So I just wanted you to kind of know where like this spectrum lies, and that you can totally be such a beautiful dreamer and know that miracles happen and experience miracles and make it happen and live happy and even be happy and fulfilled most of the time, but still not be in a place where you're in a toxic positivity place, because it really depends on your approach and, what is the full puzzle versus, thinking that one puzzle piece is the whole thing. But for sure, you can live mostly a happy life, mostly a fulfilling life. You can live a life where things are challenging, but they're not as much of a struggle as they might be for others, because of the way that you're approaching it and working with it. So that is all completely valid, and that is all available. That is all a real possibility for how you can live your life. That does not need to be something that is just automatically labeled as too positive, too wishful thinking, too out of reach. Okay, so I hope this episode was helpful. I hope that it really helps you discern between positive thinking and toxic positivity, so that you can start to reflect on that in yourself, and also just within the lessons that you're learning, and also what you're learning from others, maybe what you're reading in books and things like that, to help you just more effectively implement practices that you may have already been trying or are starting to try, such as, changing your thought patterns, changing your neural pathways, or manifesting and things like that. I hope that you find ways that you can apply this so that those practices can be a lot more effective, and that you can just live a happier, more fulfilled life. So I will be putting in the link, in the show notes, I'll be putting my link for one-on-one coaching. I do offer a free 15-minute consultation, because I definitely want to make sure that I am the right fit for you, that you are the right fit for working with me. So that's what that consultation is all about. It is a $11 deposit. That's just because of things like no-shows, late cancellations, things like that. So it is free. You will get refunded, so long as you show up or you reschedule within like 48 hours or 24 hours. You'll have to check my policy. I forget which one it is. But yeah, as long as you do that, you'll get refunded. It's a free consultation. So anyway, feel free to check that out if you would like to work with me further. And yeah, I hope you all have a wonderful sunny day. Thank you for tuning in to the Sunny Days podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and catch more of my free content by following me at Alex the Good Witch on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If this episode resonated with you, please take a screenshot, post it in your stories, and tag me on Instagram. I appreciate your time here with me today. Peace and love to you all, and I will see you in the next episode.